The CEO thought she was a scammer until he saw the ultrasound with his name on it. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The relentless, rhythmic beeping of the NICU monitors was a constant, low-grade hum that Maya Ellis had long ago learned to tune into, a melody of fragility and fight. Tonight, the fight was in her own chest. She smoothed the crumpled ultrasound image beneath her navy scrubs. It was a perfectly ordinary image to anyone else, a healthy, developing life. But in the corner, written in the shaky, final script of Finn, the dying whistleblower from Voss Corp, was a single, devastating name scrawled next to the patient notes. Voss, D. Finn had passed an hour later, leaving behind that ghost of a name and an encrypted drive hidden inside a cheap, plastic prayer statue. The man had used his final breath to link her life, and the life growing inside her, to the one name that both terrified and offered an impossible answer to her brother Liam's wrongful imprisonment. Liam, who had been framed with a phony contract bearing the unassailable signature of the one man who could crush her with a thought, Dominic Voss. Maya didn't need a savior, but she needed justice, and she was willing to trade her silence and her safety for the chance to clear her family's name. The NICU was quiet, a warm bubble of soft light and soft sound, a world away from the cold glass and steel she was about to confront. Dominic Voss viewed emotion as a critical system flaw. At 34, he presided over the entirety of Voss Tower, a structure of glass and polished steel that mirrored his personal philosophy, sharp, impenetrable, and built on iron rules. Trust was a liability, and every interaction was codified in a contract. When his security chief, Marcus, announced a situation in the lobby, a petite nurse claiming to carry his heir, Dominic's cool slate-gray eyes didn't flicker. He had never made a mistake that sloppy. Never. He was in the middle of a strategic review with his COO, Helena Rourke, her immaculate platinum bob unmoving as she watched him. He dismissed the claim with a wave of his hand, a gesture of absolute control. Escort her out, Marcus. A thorough background check. If she's running a scam, I want the full playbook. He assumed it was a calculated play for a quick payout, a predictable attempt to introduce chaos into his perfectly ordered life. Maya, however, was not easily dismissed. She allowed Marcus's tailored suit security detail to escort her out, offering no resistance, her dark, curly hair held in a practical, tight bun, her expression measured. She was done with the sentimental approach. She spent the next 48 hours observing Dominic's schedule, understanding the rhythms of his isolation. When she returned, she bypassed the initial security with a forged vendor ID, appearing in the mirror-walled boardroom just as a meeting adjourned. She didn't lead with the ultrasound this time. She led with a name, whispered just loud enough to cut through the boardroom's post-meeting chatter. The encrypt, D-logs for Project Etha. Your signature protocol, Mr. Voss. It was breached. Dominic froze. Helena Rourke's smile, usually a controlled, practiced weapon, wavered for a millisecond before snapping back into place. That was the only reaction Dominic needed to see. The paternity claim was noise. The security breach was a war. Voss Corp's entire infrastructure depended on the absolute invincibility of Dominic's biometric and digital signature, the legal foundation of his empire. You have 60 seconds, he stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commanded immediate, absolute attention. Maya pulled out the thumb-sized, encrypted drive, holding it casually. Liam Ellis, my brother, framed using a fraudulent contract that carried your signature to cover up the money transfer to a shell corporation. The whistleblower Finn gave me this. He knew your rules, Mr. Voss. He knew you'd never tolerate a security flaw like this. She didn't plead. She didn't emote. She stated facts, demanding justice through logic. She knew Dominic wouldn't help a sister. He might, however, need an asset to plug an existential flaw in his security. Dominic stared at her, assessing the hazel eyes that met his without fear, the strong set of her jaw beneath the soft curve of her face. This wasn't a gold digger. This was a woman operating on a higher, more dangerous code, family. He glanced at Helena, who was now advocating for an immediate, legalistic dismissal. The girl is a liability, Dominic. We crush the scam artist, then we run an internal audit. But Dominic saw the faint tension in Helena's grip on her diamond cuff, the subtle sharpness in her ice blue eyes. She was too eager for the matter to be resolved externally. Dominic's gut, the instinct that had built a billion-dollar empire, told him the chaos Maya represented was a distraction from the chaos already within his gates. "You're right, Helena," Dominic said, walking toward Maya, his presence like a storm held in check. "An internal audit is precisely what's needed, but I don't trust the systems that allowed the breach." He stopped a foot away from Maya, leaning down just enough to make his dominance undeniable. "You want justice for your brother. I want the identity of the person who compromised my signature. We have a contract." He took the drive. "You will stay here, under my surveillance. You will work on decrypting these logs. If you lie, if you deviate, I will crush you. If you tell the truth and we find the leak, your brother walks free and you walk away with every security log you need to clear his name." He didn't mention the ultrasound. He wouldn't validate the emotional risk yet. Maya nodded once, her expression unyielding. "Agreed. I want a commitment that Liam walks free, not a settlement." Dominic merely nodded, his jaw tight. The deal was struck, forged not in trust, but in mutually beneficial desperation and a shared, dangerous enemy. He had let chaos through the door, but only so he could control the inevitable fallout. Part 2. Under Surveillance, Under Siege. The cold geometry of Dominic's Voss Tower penthouse was an accurate reflection of its owner. It was a space designed for observation, not habitation. Maya was installed in a large, but utterly minimalist, guest suite. No trinkets, no color, just glass walls overlooking the sprawl of the city, a view that felt less like freedom and more like being held in a gilded cage thousands of feet in the air. Marcus, the security chief, remained a silent, watchful presence, providing the necessary equipment but no comfort. Dominic laid out his iron rules during their first evening meal, a sterile affair held at a vast granite island. "You will not leave the penthouse without Marcus. You will not communicate with anyone, including your brother, until this is resolved. You are not my guest. You are an essential piece of a corporate defense strategy." Any attempt to use the other file, he gestured vaguely to the ultrasound he had filed in a secure vault, "will be viewed as a violation of our agreement, and I will terminate our arrangement immediately and unilaterally." His tone was devoid of personal malice. It was simply the voice of a man accustomed to absolute authority. Maya, dressed in a borrowed, severely tailored wrap dress that felt alien to her, matched his intensity. "I understand. I'm here for Liam. I'm here for the truth." She didn't mention the nausea she fought daily, the reality of the growing life that made her need for Dominic's protection a devastating, personal necessity. The truth had to wait until her brother was safe. She began her work, staring into the cold blue light of the server screen. The encrypted logs were a masterpiece of digital obfuscation, a professional job. It confirmed Finn's warning. This was internal, high-level, and designed to look like an outside breach. What surprised Dominic was not the complexity of the logs, but Maya's singular focus. She worked methodically, her mind sharp, her nurse's patience perfectly suited to the meticulous, tedious task of code breaking. He had expected her to be an emotional wreck, to lash out or break down. Instead, she was a quiet, relentless force, fueled by a purpose he couldn't buy, bully, or extinguish. He watched her on the hidden camera feeds, observing her late-night hours, the way she tucked her loose strands of dark, curly hair behind her ear, the small silver locket from her late mother always visible against her collarbone. He started spending more time in the penthouse's home office, ostensibly working but truly observing. He needed to understand the one variable he hadn't factored into his analysis. Maya. She was the antithesis of Voss Corp, soft, warm, chaotic, yet stronger than the glass walls that enclosed them. One evening, searching for an old financial statement, she stumbled upon his one personal indulgence. A hidden piano room, bathed in dim light, a rare moment of softness in the unforgiving space. She didn't touch it. She merely paused, a moment of recognition passing over her face, a flicker of shared, private loneliness that unnerved him more than any threat to his stock price. Meanwhile, the decryption was beginning to yield results. The fake shell companies and the money transfers were confirming the conspiracy. The logs showed an internal system bypass, not an external hack. The use of Dominic's biometric signature was a constant in the cover-up paperwork that had framed Liam. It's someone with access to your system diagnostics and high-level contract clearance, Mr. Voss, she reported one afternoon, her voice steady. They leveraged a maintenance window to push the fraudulent contract through the approval queue. As she spoke, the screen flickered, the system stuttering, then flashing a catastrophic data corruption warning. It was not a glitch. The server rack that hosted the encrypted drive's work had suddenly begun a sequence to wipe the data. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through Maya's composure. She scrambled for the emergency system reboot. Dominic, who had been standing behind her, reacted instantly, his hand slamming down on the manual power cut, killing the rack before the wipe could complete. The silence that followed was thick, with the scent of ozone and the realization of imminent danger. That wasn't a malfunction, Dominic stated, his voice now entirely stripped of the CEO's corporate varnish, replaced by the grim authority of the man who ruled from the shadows. The traitor knows you're here. They're active. He looked at Maya, her chest rising and falling quickly, her eyes wide with shock but already refocusing on the task. The attack shifted everything. The data was saved, but the imperative had changed. Maya was no longer a temporary asset. She was a target holding the only key to his safety, and in a way, his entire empire. The instinct to crush the perceived threat had been replaced by a powerful, unfamiliar urge to protect the undeniable one. He needed her alive, needed her to finish the decryption, and the need was becoming dangerously personal. Part 3. Exposed secrets and unraveling control. The attempt to wipe the logs broke the fragile, professional truce between them. Danger had introduced a raw, shared intimacy that contracts couldn't cover. Dominic escalated his security measures, deploying his loyal, non-corporate team, the people who understood loyalty that wasn't bought with a paycheck, to secure the penthouse perimeter. He never left Maya alone. His presence became a heavy, protective shroud, and the proximity intensified the tension to a breaking point. The final phase of the decryption revealed the smoking gun. The maintenance window used to insert the fraudulent contract and frame Liam Ellis was only accessible via a high-level system override code, a code exclusively known and distributed by Dominic and Helena Rourke. Furthermore, the timing of Liam's framing perfectly coincided with Helena's ascension to COO, where she had been in charge of auditing the exact department Liam was accused of corrupting. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Helena was a silent, meticulous viper who had used Dominic's own rules against him, manipulating the system while acting as his most loyal lieutenant. Dominic stared at the evidence, a cold fury settling in his gut, not because of the betrayal of trust, which he never truly gave, but because of the audacious compromise of his absolute control. He spent the evening sequestered in his office, his phone silent, plotting the perfect trap. Maya, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, found herself restless. She went to the only spot in the penthouse that offered a hint of comfort, the hidden piano room. She sat on the bench, not touching the keys, just absorbing the silence. Dominic walked in, finding her bathed in the soft, spillover light of the city. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the weariness that wasn't just about the code. He sat next to her, not speaking, the silence between them weighted with unspoken feelings and mutual danger. "My father," he began, his voice surprisingly rough, a sound he rarely used. "He built this with his bare hands. He taught me the rules, power, control, never expose a weakness. But he never taught me what happens when the loyalty you buy is corrupted." Maya looked at him, her hazel eyes direct and unwavering. "My loyalty isn't bought, Dominic. It's earned. I'm here for Liam. But if you think betrayal is about corporate structure, you're wrong. Betrayal is personal. It's what Helena did to you. It's what this world does to people like Liam." The conversation about family, about the simple, brutal reality of loyalty, was the catalyst. It shattered the brittle veneer of their professional arrangement. Dominic, who lived by the cold certainty of contracts, was overwhelmed by the raw, dangerous certainty of her purpose. He reached out, his tailored suit suddenly feeling like a cage, and pulled her toward him. Their intimacy was not gentle. It was a desperate, urgent collision of two people trapped by fate and danger, a reaction to the conspiracy that threatened to consume them, a moment of raw, unplanned vulnerability against the cold logic of his world. It was a release of the immense pressure that had been building since she walked through his door. The morning after was steeped in a tense, dangerous aftermath. Dominic was furious at his own loss of control, the violation of his most sacred rule: never allow chaos through the door. He was packing the penthouse, his presence a dark storm. Maya faced him, pulling the hidden, personal truth from the terrifying knowledge of the night before. "I'm not a threat, Dominic. I'm your tiebreaker. The ultrasound, it wasn't a scam." She finally revealed the truth, her hand instinctively resting on her abdomen. "I'm pregnant. This is your child. And now that you know who the traitor is, your rules don't matter. You have two choices: expose Helena and protect your future, or watch the woman carrying your bloodline be destroyed by the very conspiracy you allowed to flourish." The word child struck him with the force of a physical blow. A legacy, not built on contracts, but on blood. A terrifying, beautiful vulnerability. Before he could process the irreversible tie, the glass of the penthouse seemed to shudder. The lights flickered, and a loud, metallic grinding sound came from the motorized blinds, which began to close rapidly and unevenly. Marcus, already on high alert, yelled, "The exterior system is compromised. It's a targeted attack." The blinds, controlled by an external override, were not just closing. They were malfunctioning, their heavy aluminum structure designed to retract only, now pressing inward, targeting the central window where Maya was standing. Dominic acted on pure, protective instinct. He lunged, shoving Maya violently away from the window just as the last, heavy panel slammed against the central pane, spiderwebbing the reinforced glass and sending a shower of pulverized fragments across the floor. Had she been standing there, the impact would have been fatal. Dominic was breathing hard, his body shielding hers, the CEO persona completely obliterated by the primal, dark rage of the protector. The attack was no longer a corporate defense. It was an act of war against his nascent family. "Marcus," he commanded, his voice deadly calm, "we're done with the boardroom. Initiate Operation Safe House. Now." Part 4. Retribution and the Safe House Imperative. The retreat to the Riverside Safe House was an immediate, brutal shift from the sterile calm of Voss Tower to the stark, efficient world of Dominic's true power. The safe house was built into the side of a cliff, disguised as a luxury garage, a place where black SUVs and camera blind spots were the real security. Maya saw the truth of Dominic Voss. The CEO was a mask. The core was the meticulously organized boss who commanded absolute loyalty and moved with the deadly grace of a predator. Marcus and two other silent, formidable men, his most trusted, formed their constant shadow. Dominic dropped the pretense of contracts entirely. His every move was driven by a single, terrifying resolve: retribution and protection. "Helena wanted to play in my world," he told Maya, standing in the cold concrete observation room overlooking the river. "She compromised my security, framed the innocent, and tried to murder the woman carrying my child. She will pay in the currency she understands: absolute, unrecoverable loss." He set the trap with cold precision. He had Marcus leak a false signal, a digital whisper that suggested Maya and the encrypted drive were exposed and vulnerable at a secluded hunting cabin 3 hours north. This was meant to draw Helena out of the tower. Meanwhile, Dominic initiated a series of financial audit triggers that looked like a major outside investor had become spooked, forcing Helena to try and seize control of specific corporate assets to prevent a market panic, the assets that were tied to her fraudulent shell companies. Helena, confident in her ability to manipulate Dominic's focus and believing him blinded by personal chaos, took the bait. She was too greedy and too arrogant to believe he could see through her perfect facade. She first attempted to finalize Liam's frame-up, using the false crisis as cover to shred the last incriminating evidence against her in the Voss Tower digital archives. She also started moving assets, using her access to his signature systems to prepare for the final takeover. While Dominic waited for her final move, one of his non-corporate operatives intercepted one of Helena's close, lower-level associates who was attempting to scrub a physical office terminal. Under intense, non-corporate pressure, the associate confessed the full scope of the plot. Helena had viewed Dominic's control through contracts as a weakness, a sentimental adherence to rules that limited true power. She had systematically framed several key rivals, including Liam, who was a data analyst too close to her fraudulent spending lines. Her ultimate goal was to destabilize Dominic using the corporate fraud, take over as CEO by positioning herself as the necessary, ruthless cleanup figure, and eventually usurp the entire empire, believing she was the only one ruthless enough to wield that kind of power. Dominic listened to the recording of the confession, his face a study in chilling stillness. It was never about a contract or even money. It was about a total, fundamental misunderstanding of his power. He wasn't a CEO who occasionally blurred the lines. He was a boss who used the CEO role as a layer of sophisticated camouflage. Helena had mistaken the camouflage for the man. "She's coming here," Dominic said, a certainty in his voice that required no confirmation. "She'll realize the hunting cabin was a diversion when the financial triggers fail to resolve. She knows the drive is the only proof, and the safe house is the only place I'd take you when I'm truly compromised. She thinks she has to neutralize the mother to eliminate the leverage." He looked at Maya, who was watching him with a complex mix of fear and strange, undeniable respect. He was dangerous, terrifyingly so, but every bit of that danger was now aimed at protecting her. "The time for contracts is over," Dominic stated. "We will meet her in the garage, Marcus full lockdown, only the essential four." He didn't ask Maya to retreat. He simply nodded toward the inner door. Maya, however, stood her ground. "I stay," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Liam's name is on that drive, and I want to see the end of her game." Dominic looked at her, seeing the NICU nurse's strength, the quiet steel that fought for the weakest, now turned toward his dangerous world. He nodded, a slow, grudging acknowledgement of her own unwavering loyalty. The final showdown was set, to take place in the cold, hard space where his corporate mask always fell away. Part 5. The Earning of Loyalty and the New Contract. The safe house garage was vast, concrete, and cold, illuminated by stark overhead lights that cast long, merciless shadows. The air was thick with the scent of high-octane fuel and anticipation. Dominic stood in the center, impeccably dressed in his tailored charcoal suit, a black omega on his wrist, but the presence he projected was not that of a CEO waiting for an Uber. It was the chilling stillness of a man prepared for war. Marcus and the others were positioned in the shadows, weapons silent but ready. Maya stood slightly behind Dominic, her hand lightly resting on the cold steel of a tool chest, her hazel eyes fixed on the heavy, armored door. When the door rumbled open, revealing 2 black SUVs and a small cadre of armed men, Helena Rourke stepped out, flanked by the men. She was immaculate, her platinum bob perfect, a severe dress outlining her lean figure. Her face was a mask of cold confidence, the final, arrogant belief that she had cornered her former boss. "Dominic," she said, her voice ringing with feigned concern. "I knew something was wrong. You should have trusted me. I could have handled the situation quietly." But involving the scam artist, her eyes flicked to Maya with undisguised contempt. "A disastrous mistake." Dominic did not move. He did not raise his voice. He simply projected his will. "It was not a mistake, Helena. It was a test. And you failed." He raised his hand, and Marcus stepped out of the shadow, holding a small voice recorder. He played the confession of Helena's associate, detailing the full scope of her conspiracy, the framing of Liam, the systematic manipulation of the signature protocol, and her ultimate goal of usurping the company. Helena's mask shattered, her face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and frantic rage. "You used a street thug's confession against me, a nurse. You threw away your entire empire for a common thief and his pregnant tramp." She lunged, not at Dominic, but toward Maya, a small, polished blade appearing instantly in her hand, a final, desperate, personal act of violence. Dominic, however, had anticipated her final move. He was the master of anticipatory defense. Before she had taken 2 steps, his hand caught her wrist with shocking force, a grip of unbreakable steel. He didn't hit her or fight her. He simply disarmed her, tossing the blade clattering across the concrete floor. The sheer speed and economy of his movement were more terrifying than any shouting match. He held her wrist, forcing her to look at Maya, who stood unmoving, her expression one of quiet, satisfied resolution. "The thief is gone," Dominic stated, his voice a low, final verdict. "The proof is compiled. Everything goes to the authorities, the evidence, the confessions, the full audit logs. Liam Ellis is already free. Your conspiracy is over. The immediate resolution was swift, efficient, and irreversible. Helena and her men were turned over to the authorities, the evidence so meticulously compiled by Maya and the Voss team that no appeal would succeed. Liam Ellis was released within the hour, his name legally and publicly cleared. The immediate danger passed, and Dominic and Maya finally returned to the stillness of the penthouse. The glass window was being repaired, the symbol of the chaos now being permanently sealed out. Dominic found Maya in the newly silent piano room. "Your brother is free," he said, the words simple and true. "The debt is paid. The contract is resolved." He looked at her, his usual expression of controlled power now softened by a profound vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. "You're free to leave, Maya. You held your end of the bargain." Maya turned, looking at the man who had terrified her, protected her, and ultimately saved her family. "And you, Dominic, are you free? You destroyed your inner circle, you broke your own rules, and you exposed your vulnerability, all to protect a woman you believed was a scam artist." Dominic walked to the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys but not touching them. He looked out at the city, the empire he had built on cold logic. "I built my world on contracts because I believed loyalty had to be enforced. You taught me that true loyalty is innate. It's the only thing that can't be bought. The chaos you brought, Maya, it wasn't a flaw. It was the truth my world lacked." He turned to face her, the CEO finally shedding his skin to reveal the man. "You are not my leverage. You are my imperative. I can't let you go. I won't. I'll spend the rest of my life ensuring that no chaos, no contract, and no enemy can ever touch you or our child." He walked towards her, pulling the small silver locket from her mother gently into his hand. "I offer you a new contract," he murmured, his thumb brushing the skin beneath her jaw. "Unconditional loyalty, absolute protection, and a family built not on fear, but on the simple, terrifying fact that I love you." He pulled her into an embrace that was both strong and tender, a final, conclusive intimacy that sealed their fate. The mafia boss had found his one weakness, and in doing so, had found his greatest strength. The romance was earned, built on the solid foundation of shared danger, unwavering loyalty, and a love that transcended any rule in his old, cold empire. They were a family, and the life they had forged in the face of betrayal would be fiercely protected forever.